Welcome everybody. For those that are coming in, if you'd like to leave your, you can either leave your cameras off or you can turn them on. That is, either way is totally fine. We're at about 7:02, so we'll give us about another minute and then we will be getting started. So hold on for 1 second. Okay, it looks like we're getting some final folks in from the waiting room. I'm gonna flip off sharing for 1 second, if that's okay. Just for our recording. There we go. And then Michael, if you want to take it back over here in 1 minute, that'd be fine.
Sounds good.
Okay, we will get started. Welcome everybody. Welcome everybody. This is a meeting of the Kingfield Neighborhood Association Redevelopment Committee. We are a committee of the Kingfield Neighborhood Association that looks at generally change in the neighborhood. So whether that's redevelopment, buildings, streets, changes generally in the neighborhood, and provides guidance, insight, and mostly information to neighbors about what is happening and ways that they can continue to stay involved and have influence and say over changes in the neighborhood. So this is a special meeting of our committee focused on a single property site, 3601 Nicollet, and a development proposal for that site. We have folks here, how kind of the evening is going to go. We will have a hard stop at 8. We are going to have a presentation of the proposal of the building that is going on, and then we will be fielding questions. I am going to monitor the chat. And so because we have quite a few folks here, the best way that we found that this happens and this works is if folks can please ask their questions in the chat. You'll find that at the bottom of the screen. You'll see a little thing that says chat. If you click on that, you just want to make sure that you are sending that chat to everyone, and therefore I will be able to see it. Or also you could just send it directly to me if you would prefer that. I will be kind of organizing those questions and reading them and sharing those with Michael and Dan and everybody, and they will be answering them for us. So if you have some questions right off the bat that you have about the proposal, feel free to throw those in the chat and I will start recording them now. Given all of that, I will kick it over to, I believe, Michael, you were going to kind of do a brief introduction, and then I'll ask maybe that all of you guys do quick kind of introductions on who you are and your roles in the project, and then kick it over. I'll go ahead and start the presentation. So thank you, and go ahead.
Thanks, Chris. Really appreciate everybody tuning in tonight. My name is Michael Margulies, and I'm with Valerian LLC. Valerian works with the owner, Dan Carlson, to help put this project together and get it constructed and approved by the city before that. We take these meetings very seriously. We desire the input of the neighborhood. We intend on being in this neighborhood for a long time, and we want to respect all the work you've done in planning and in showing how you want your community to develop. And so we do take this very seriously, and we very much welcome your ideas, your comments, your criticisms, and how we can do this better. There is still lots of time before this project becomes a hard reality, and there's plenty of time to incorporate your concerns. With me tonight is Dan Carlson of New Life Properties. Dan is owns a number of properties in the South Minneapolis area, and it has a fair number of properties that are geared to workforce and affordable housing, as well as market rate housing. Also with me tonight are two architects working on the project, Dean DeVolis, who is the president and principal of DJR Architecture, and Michael Coons, who is the project manager for architect for this project. Michael has done the hard drawing on the project and knows the nooks and crannies pretty well. With that, I'm going to turn it over to Michael for a presentation to walk you through the project for about 10 minutes, and then we would be very interested in your comments and ideas and guidance. Thank you. Ooh,
Michael, I think you're muted right now.
Of course, I was muted. Well, thanks everyone for tuning in tonight and letting us present this project to you. Again, this is 3601 Nicollet Avenue. It is a 5-story, 52-unit building, of course, at the corner of Nicollet Avenue and 36th Street. I'm going to be presenting exactly what we sent to the city of Minneapolis for the land use application. And so we'll just walk through this one by one, and I'll give you a good overview of what the project looks like. And Dean, if you've got any comments, don't hold back.
I'll provide color commentary while you go through it.
Great. So, you know, this parcel has been vacant for quite some time. I think there was a gas station that was on the parcel, probably, you know, that was torn down probably close to 20 years ago, if not more. And so, you know, some of the soils may have some contamination, and so we'll get into that in a little bit. But the overall zoning of this project is a C2 zoning with an overlay, a built form overlay from the city of Minneapolis, where because of the zoning and the built form overlay, you know, they want mass with the new 2040 plan here. And, you know, if we were going to use all of what we could, with the 3 different bonuses on the built form overlay, we could actually go up to 6 stories and basically cover almost the entire site. We chose this 5-story and a little bit, you know, a lesser footprint, I guess I'll describe, because it made better units, and I think we were just worried about the overall scale of the building a little bit. So that's kind of how we arrived where we did. You know, also, you know, at the corner of Nicollet and 36, we have some retail on the Nicollet side, and we have a residential access point along 36 coming from the north. So here's just some aerials of the site. I'm sure you're all well aware of where this is. And of course, you know, the zoning. So C2, I don't believe we're in the zoning overlay district, but of course the built form overlay that the Minneapolis, you know, Planning Commission has just come out with, you know, not too long ago, within this past year, is also contributing to the regulations here. Here's a diagram, just shows, you know, the site here, this little area, and then just the different elements around it. So we've got, of course, across the street, a daycare, and then we've got some restaurants and bars and different apartment buildings, you know, schools, parks, just a wide overview of the overall site. Then a little bit closer view of the surrounding buildings of the site. Of course, across the street, we've got the child care center. Directly adjacent, we have the, you know, the auto service center that this will, you know, share the property line with on the south side. Various apartments, you know, a newer apartment building a little bit to the south on Nicollet. You know, and we've got a community center that's just to the north of the U-Haul center, and then, you know, different apartments and so on. these are just views from different parts of the site looking back towards the site. So again, I'm sure you guys are well aware this is. It's a very prominent corner on 36th and Nicollet, and just different views to orient you, as well as some street panoramas. I'll go through this relatively quickly. So the site plan, we were allowed, with the way it's zoned, it's a 0 lot setback on all 4 sides with the C2 zoning. Had there been a residential property to the south, it would have been a 5-foot setback, but because it's commercial use, we're allowed to go right to the property line. And so what we're doing is we're going about a foot from the property line for constructability reasons, but we are taking up the majority of the site, the footprint at level 1. As I said before, we've got retail to the Nicollet side. This retail is about 25, 30 feet deep. And the idea with this retail is that we know that retail is changing along Nicollet, and that we may need to subdivide this down. And so what we're showing a vestibule in this location right now, because we really didn't want to interrupt the corner view, thinking this would be a nice spot for a tenant. But we're not limited to only this access point. We can put multiple access points around here if, if what people want or what possible tenants want are smaller spaces to lease. So yeah, right along Nicollet, we're at basically a 0 setback line. Along the north side, we're also at a 0 lot setback with about a foot, for constructability reasons off the lot line. We are recessing the vestibules on both the retail and the lobby space to get the door swing clearance. Of course, we can't be swinging doors over the property line in Minneapolis, as well as another niche or recess for the bike lounge, bike storage area here. We've got, utility areas, water, trash. Trash is going to be enclosed. It will be, kept in this area until it is picked up probably several times a week off of the alley, but this will be a totally contained operation as far as trash goes. And then we've got parking garage here. We've got 18 spaces, so 17 in accessible space that will be accessed completely off of the alley. And then a transformer is going to be at the southeast corner of the site. So here's a color plan that's a little bit more updated than that site plan. What we really wanted to try to do is make this a bike-friendly area. And so we have, we're actually over the requirement right now in the city of Minneapolis, and we're providing 1 bike spot per unit in this bike storage area. This bike lounge is supposed to be really this amenity area where people can fix their bikes, and maybe there's a TV in there. It's a lounge where people can kind of sit back and, get their bike ready for the day or make repairs if they need to. But really, we're trying to really emphasize bikes and the use of bikes. Of course, we've got the entrance lobby here to the left, meal package, and then elevator to go up to the rest of the floors. So this is a typical floor plate from levels 2 through 5. They're pretty much identical, except for on level 2, we have got access to get out to what's going to be an outdoor patio on level 2, which will be an amenity for the residents. And so we've got 2 access points to get the required egress from that space. But you can see the different units, the opportunities here. So we've got 1-bedrooms, studios, and alcoves, and there is 1 stack of 2 bedrooms. So there are minimum requirements for the square footage of units in Minneapolis, and we're kind of well above those minimum square footage requirements when it comes to the units. 2 stairs for egress. Again, we've got janitor, MEP, rooms for electrical and low voltage, and then 1 stack of elevators. We've got a trash room, and then there'll be chutes for recycling and trash. And typically, composting is done. You kind of have to bring it down because there are some just problems with putting compost in trash chutes. Gets dirty, messy, and stinky. So moving out to the exterior of the building. So we really, we've got this corner site and we wanted to position the building kind of having equal weight on Nicollet and 36th. So we positioned the building so it's really kind of hugging that corner. And, it's a simple palette of materials that we're using, but I think there's a sophistication in the design and we're breaking it down into a real kind of smaller scale that fits this small site. It's not a real big site. It's not a real big building. And I think there's enough complexity here to make it interesting. But I think when you've got a small building like this, you run the risk of making it too complex and too busy just because it's just not that big of a building. I think we only have about 120 feet across the front of this building, which is, a relatively small building in Minneapolis. But as far as the material palette, I guess on level 1, we're going to have a lot of storefront and glass at the retail space. And then there's going to be this manganese iron spot brick with a dark colored grout to match the brick, which will really make it seem monolithic and clean. We're going to have a dark aluminum canopy that runs, at the vestibules, and then a little eyebrow that runs the rest of the way. We've got we're going to have exposed fastener standing seam metal panel. That's the black. And I should say, this is something I didn't mention the last time we talked last week. One of the things that I always try to do in these buildings is it's so hard to get depth and shadow line at the windows just by the way they're made. Typically the windows have a window flange and you install that window on the studs, and the cladding material gets bumped right up, against the windows, and there's no room for depth or for shadow lines in buildings. And shadow lines are one of the things that really make a building look rich and dynamic. And so what we're doing with this corrugated material is we're putting this on a Z-furring channel. So it's going to be out about 4 inches from the face of this other material, which is a white fiber cement board. And what that's going to do is it's going to make this building seem like it has got much more depth and it's much more dramatic than a typical building, or kind of the rest of this building, or a typical kind of multifamily building. So that's a very important design move that I wanted to make sure I talked about. We've also got this wood look metal panel that's kind of running through both materials, that's going to organize and really help kind of bring both materials together. So we've got some sections of the building. It said that the first story is parking, retail, and lobby space and function. We do not have a subterranean level for a couple different reasons. One is, typically you put parking in these kind of buildings down there, and it's just practically not big enough to get a car down at the ramping requirements necessary. And then the other thing is, because there was a gas station there, we're almost certain that there's probably some kind of a contamination in the soil that it's best just to left where it is. Got some shadow studies where we're showing the impact of shadows of the building. The greatest shadow that's going to affect it is going to be, kind of to the north where the U-Haul Center is. And so, we've also got, the extra wide street here with the extra wide right of way at 36. And so, some shadows will be affecting a few of the neighbors, but I think it's relatively minor. And then some more views around the building. So this is a view from the north looking at the 36th Street facade. Again, the entrance to the residential. And this is more of the Nicollet facade with the entrance to the retail. So one thing that we need to talk about is the variance that we're going for the parking. The building overall is kind of as right. We're using one bonus with the built form overlay to get us to the FAR, which is the floor area ratio. if we wanted to, we could have gone up to 3 bonuses and made this building much more dense. But like I said, it just, with units and the natural daylight coming in from the southeast, we elected to go with the 1 bonus. But the parking, just because of the floor plate size and and other considerations, we were limited to those 18 stalls. Really, right now, this building would be required to have half of the units for parking stalls within the building, which would have been 26 plus 3 for commercial. So we're really required to have 29. And so our variance is to go for 18 parking stalls. We should mention that the city of Minneapolis is in the process of limiting their parking requirement overall throughout all projects. And actually, the Planning Commission has already approved, and I don't know exactly what the requirement is, but I think it might be even zero parking requirement for a building like this. So, so I think that kind of concludes my presentation part. And I don't know, Dean, do you want to add anything, or should we start fielding questions?
No, I think you did an excellent job, far better than myself. So, Michael, thank you for walking through the building. And just to clarify one comment, when someone said you look like you filled the site, we may have filled the site in its area, but we could have gone a story taller and still within the zoning requirements. So we opted to scale it back and go to a 5-story versus 6-story building. So I just want to clarify that one comment. Outside of that, we're good and we stand for questions. Thank you.
Awesome, thank you. And just to kind of remind folks, we are putting our questions in the chat. So if you do have questions, please throw those into the chat and I will kind of organize them together and then present them to the team. So I guess the first question I had, and just kind of going off of Dean's comment about filling the site, there was a question about kind of filling the site and how if you have a plan and how you're planning on managing snow removal, and also thinking about kind of like with filling the site with the building, incorporating green space, plantings, especially green space and plantings for tenants that are in the building itself. So 2-part question, mostly about snow removal and then also green space.
Michael, you want me to take or you want to go?
Yeah, I think I can describe really the north side of the site. We do have, there's a 5-foot right of way that's outside the property line to the north until we hit the sidewalk. And that is meant to be planted and, will be adequate area to, for a little bit more vegetation. And then as well as, where snow could be put in the winter from at least this part of the sidewalk. As far as snow removal from the alley, this just because we're that close, to the property line doesn't mean there's not a little bit of margin left over, from the alley to where actually the building begins. And so the snow will be piled there. So I don't know. I mean, it is a tight site and we're getting close to the property line. Yeah. There's enough room there to navigate the snow.
And the idea is that, all the building basically all the snow basically stays on the building on that basis. So we have, like I say, we have room for some. There was a second question about planting. We have the green strip along the side. And also we have the community deck, which we may make individual raised beds to provide residents an opportunity. So actually be 2, 1, the public right away on the main floor, and 2, the community deck that sits on the 2nd floor of the building. So there's 2 options that we're thinking of incorporating the planting opportunity for the residents.
Great. Could you talk a little bit about kind of that upper deck, what your thoughts are for what's going to be up there, who's going to have access to it, and is that going to be like a built out feature of the project from the beginning?
The answer is yes, it will be a built out feature from the beginning in the basis. It won't be designed to be an active use because there's units right on it. So it won't have like pickleball or anything like that. So it's meant to be for the gardening, as I mentioned, outdoor hanging. There'll be a trellis, there'll be elements. There may be a smoke pit built into it. So it'll be a green, sort of think more of an outdoor living room design, more in a passive use as opposed to an active use, will be the basis of this. We intentionally left one unit out, as you'd see, to notch it in so there'd be light going to the hallway, so that the hallways were bright and kept perceived shorter. And then at least on all those floors, all those windows from the common hallway overlook the common community space. So it adds a little more interest to it. So that's its basic function, but it will be developed out 100% when the building's open. It's not going to just be a dead roof as part of it.
Okay, great, thanks. Could you talk a little bit about affordability? There was a specific question that said they noted that 8% of the units you had noted were going to be affordable. Can you just talk about what that equates to in actual units in the building, and then what you see those, what that equates to AMI and also rents?
Sure.
Michael?
Let me take that. At the moment, the city of Minneapolis is requiring an inclusionary housing policy of 8% of the units. 52 units we have, that equals 2.6. We are that will round up to three units. It is a possibility, and I don't want to make too much of a commitment on behalf of the owner, but the owner has adopted programs to devote certain portions of his unit numbers to affordable units at 60% AMI, and in return for the tax benefits, the real estate tax benefits that go along with that. And so that's a possibility here. We think that this property will serve the needs of the workforce housing. And although the rates haven't been fully established yet, they're probably going to be pretty near the naturally occurring affordable housing prices. So that's sort of how the housing array works.
Okay, thank you. There was a question about how wide the entrances and vestibules off Nicollet and 36th will be. Also some comments around kind of like the visibility of those entrances, and thoughts around how you are going to actually kind of like draw people to those entrances, specifically the entrance off Nicollet, as that I'm assuming will be a public entrance.
So and it's public entrance to the retail on that. This side is meant to be flexible. So we assume an entry in the middle. As you can see, they have to be recessed because they're not allowed to swing doors over the public right away. Depending on our retail, we may have a corner entry. We may have 2 or 3 entries. It's designed to be flexible. It could be 2, 3, or 4 tenants. And then obviously once we have that, then we start sort of adapt the entrances to the uses we have, and then highlight the canopies, because we want to make sure there was flexibility to handle small retail, which is sort of more of a pattern along Nicollet. But if a couple larger tenants came in, it could be set up that way. So that's meant to have maximum flexibility to give us maximum retail flexibility to make sure we attract tenants. So that's really the basis of how the Nicollet facade is going to work. And actually the final story will be told when we know exactly who our tenants are and how that sets up.
Just kind of going off that a little bit, there's been a question about, especially a question about that retail. One of the questions was, is that retail space restaurant compatible? And also, have you considered kind of micro units in that space? So thinking about 200 to 300 square foot units.
If I can answer the last question, the site is a former gas station site, and there are restrictions on this site that prohibit the owner from using the first floor for residential purposes. It was probably overkill at the time that the restriction was drawn, but it was, my guess is that it was the gas, the petroleum company being overcautious and trying to protect themselves against vicarious liability in the future. The site had a tank on it for gasoline. It was removed. The MPCA closed its file, issued no action letters, no association letters. Nonetheless, the first floor cannot be used for residential or auxiliary residential purposes. So what does that mean? It means we can use it for retail. We can have a lobby. We can have this a bike lounge that you see, but we can't have some of the things that you would possibly put on a first floor, such as units, such as a residential community room and things like that. So we're kind of restricted by that nature.
Now, was a oh, sorry, Michael. I didn't mean to interrupt.
That's the second part of the question, and I probably made everybody forget the first part of the question.
So was the question about micro retail or micro units?
Micro retail. I probably stated that wrong. The question was about like micro retail or micro commercial spaces, like under 200 square foot spaces, and then also if you could put a restaurant in.
Okay. So micro retail can work. We probably have entry for 2 spaces to when we're set up on that, so that the building can accommodate it. If we get a restaurant, we'd have to coordinate the shaft, and so we're still early enough to see who shows up and turns that basis. And when you got a shaft, Minneapolis code requires an exhaust shaft to the roof for anything that has heavy cooking. If it's more of a bakery style, like a coffee shop, that's not required. We're still at the point where we have flexibility on that, and we just have to see which tenants come forward on that process. So yes to micro tenants, no problem with coffee shop. If we get a true restaurant, we'd have to accommodate the shaft, and we'll see when we get there if that type of tenant comes forward to see how we can incorporate that.
Okay, awesome. Another question was the setback to the, I believe that's the south, to the auto repair place. How close are kind of the buildings together?
You can go 0. I mean, literally could go, but we left a little bit of gap to accommodate for the auto repairs footings. Because these older buildings, the footings tended to be across property lines and so forth. So we left a slight gap, a foot, to accommodate that building. So we didn't put it into jeopardy in terms of construction. Now, we're not doing a basement because, as Michael described, we are not allowed to. But we gave a little smidgen of breathing room just to protect that building structurally.
Yeah, and that gap, you know, it's going to be in the range of, you know, a foot to 16 inches. It'll be enclosed. We'll put a sheet metal flashing or something that somebody can't get back there and get in trouble, or a kid or something. So you know, it'll be closed off, so it'll seem like it's totally kind of one building to the next without any opportunity to go in between the two.
Correct, Michael's correct, and Michael and I would get stuck in there. So, so yeah, he's absolutely right about that. It won't be left as a void to the street, nor to the alley side.
Great. There's a couple questions about all of your experience here. I would say maybe specifically in Minneapolis, designing and managing properties. So a question about how many 5 to 7 story buildings DAR has designed in Minneapolis, and then also what current properties what current properties are owned by New Life Properties and managed by them.
Dean, why don't you take the first part of that?
Oh, Dean, sorry, you got muted on accident, I think.
Okay, thank you. So I'll answer the first half of the question. I'm taking this time, probably 40 in Minneapolis, if not more, actually, in all parts of the city, for a variety of different projects, Northeast, all through South Minneapolis, north side of the city, for a whole series around the university area. So there's, I'm going to say 40 off the top of my head that are built and occupied off of Vagrant. So yeah, we've had a pretty deep, extensive background in these type of buildings. Everything from very affordable to very luxury in the full range of type of projects like this. Michael, you'll do the other half.
I think Dan, let me
Or
introduce
Dan.
Dan Carlson to explain, to describe a little bit about the other properties he owns and operates.
Sure, we own 23 other buildings with a total of 164 units in South Minneapolis. And then we also have 40 units in St. Cloud. And we own and self-manage all of those ourselves.
Great. And kind of going off that question, would you plan on managing this building? And then there was also a question about, will there be will there be someone on site, like a manager on site?
Yes, we will manage the building ourselves. We're trying to incorporate something in to have somebody on site with the retail. Like we were thinking about doing some kind of retail ourselves and have some kind of office there. Yes.
Okay, great. There's been a few questions, and I know you've talked a little bit about the parking and the parking variance. Questions about parking, specifically about impacts that decreased number of parking spots in the building would have to kind of the rest of the neighborhood. Can you just talk kind of and reiterate a little bit about your approach around parking, and also maybe kind of the guidance or direction that you're following from the city of Minneapolis in regards to parking?
The direction of city of Minneapolis is less is more. Just to be straight up, they had two things Minneapolis really, in terms of planners, that really, and what we use impose, that's too strong, impressed upon us. One, enclose it, no open lots. Two, minimize it. And that's so in terms of the city planners, that's really what our guidance has been from that aspect. We set this up to try to maximize the amount of parking you could get on the site, because obviously for a building, we want some available parking for our tenants. And that's how we chose to fill the footprint, as you may say, to maximize the parking. And we also shallowed up the retail to maximize the parking. So that was part of the process too, because normal retail can go up to 60 feet deep, but then we would have wiped out our parking. So we made sure we had active uses wrapped around the perimeter of the building, like the lobby, the bike shop, the retail, so forth, and then put that inside corner as much parking as can work out of the building to maximize that portion of it.
Yeah, and I would envision that there's going to be a large number of the residents here that don't have a car, and that's why we're making it so bike centric. That people are going to have their bike, it's right on a transit line, and so I think that there's going to be a good number of people here that don't own a car that live here.
Kind of going off that a little bit, there was two questions. One, has there been any consideration to what happens if tenant parking isn't used at capacity? Could it be paid parking for retail? And then kind of going on your point, Michael, about transit, how are you thinking about like incorporating access to transit into the building, specifically like thinking about a shelter in front of the space on Nicollet? Would that be a part of your project? That sort of thing.
So in terms of the parking, if parking is underutilized, obviously we'd utilize it to support the retail. So that's just a definite yes. Incorporating bus shelters is a trick depending how our retail sets up. Because obviously if we incorporate bike shelter, then we may live with the retail. So again, it goes back to how our retail sets up and how that basically works. So on that basis, we're tending to want to favor the retail for an active street as opposed to carve in a bus stop within the building.
If I can add to that, as probably most people on this call know, bus stops and bus shelters are the purview of the Metropolitan Transit Authority. And we couldn't, and they control that decision. So the things we can control though, are things that help people with transit. So one of the things that is going to be featured in our lobby is an electronic kiosk, which shows the bus lines, the transit lines, the approximate wait time, which lines are coming in. So a little information center that will help people use the transit more effectively and efficiently.
So at least for the residents, as opposed to waiting, they can at least see when the bus is coming, then scoot out to catch it.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you. Switching gears a little bit. One question is talking about stormwater and how stormwater is planning on being managed on the site.
Well, this
We
site
will-
is
yeah, go
below
ahead,
it's below a half acre, and so there aren't any additional stormwater management requirements for a site this size. Now, I think the city of Minneapolis is looking at modifying that, but I don't think that would be a regulation that that would fall on this project. So
Just curious, like where does the water go that hits the roof of this building?
it goes into the city storm system.
Yep, correct. It's a direct feed into the stormwater system.
Okay, thank you. Do you know what the mix of affordable units will be size-wise? Essentially, what units are you targeting for affordability? The studio, alcove, one bedroom.
That issue is probably not decided yet. I can tell you that this owner has a general desire to mix them. So I would envision that you can see a representation of all units within the affordable. The city does not specify anything, and so you're sort of left to devise your own program. We think it's a little bit more egalitarian to have this spread, but we'll see how that works at the time that we're getting closer to opening.
Okay, thank you. Question about spots for charging electronic or electric cars, electric vehicles.
That would be a possibility in our garage.
Do you have that planned currently in the proposal?
There's nothing
It's
that's go ahead.
It's just based, well, go ahead, Mike. I didn't mean to cut you off.
No, I think, I mean, I would maybe want Dan to comment on this one. I think it's a great idea. I just, it's not really our call. It's Dan's call.
I would love to see on the northeast corner of the parking lot. You see the electrical room is right there. It'd be so easy to make those 3 spots.
Okay, further down.
Electric car right there.
In
It'd be so easy.
in the southeast corner, actually take your cursor down the southeast,
Jeez.
those 3 spaces.
No, I was thinking the northeast.
Oh, northeast spaces up there. We got it. Yeah. Okay, because our transformers down there. But yeah, we would consider that.
Okay, great. And there was a question about will the units be accessible to people that use wheelchairs? And also, could you just reiterate, this building does have, you're planning on doing an elevator in it, correct?
Yes.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, I know. A lot of these are just building code and Minnesota accessibility code requirements. Of course, 2% of all units have to be handicap accessible. And so we'll certainly comply with that. And so this one, I guess there'll be several units that will, meet those requirements.
Yeah, they'll be accessible and or adaptable on that basis. And yes, it definitely has an elevator.
Okay, I think we're getting caught up on question. Here's another one quickly. This is, I think, a comment/question. It would be nice to see some more differentiation along the ground floor. The continuous glass and columns sort of all blend together. Doesn't really do much if there's multiple tenants to tell those tenants apart. I guess I'll just open that up for comment for you.
Yeah,
Okay.
I think it's good to realize that this is just a point in time in the design process. And although the building is going to be about this size and look, fairly close to this, there's going to be development that happens. And one of the areas I'd like to develop a little bit more is that storefront. And, just like was mentioned, if we do have 3 or 4 different tenants there to each call out their own entry as a separate thing and, to break down the scale of the building even more. So I fully agree with that. And that just may happen. So
Great. Kind of a clarification on my earlier question around accessibility. The person who asked that question wants to kind of reiterate, like, meaning kind of going maybe above and beyond in terms of accessibility and thinking about wheelchairs getting into showers or use the counter in the kitchen or be able to pull up a sink, also wider doorways. So maybe not just meeting basic ADA requirements, but also providing specific units that would accommodate and be specifically geared to someone in a wheelchair or other kind of mobility device.
But that is the requirements.
Yeah, so
The ADA meets that. Go ahead, Michael, sorry.
Yeah, so there'll be a handful of units here that are designed with different requirements, and all those requirements are meant for people in wheelchairs. And so everything from the kitchen layout, the kitchen countertop size, the ability to maneuver, into the appliances, into the washer dryer, and then there'll be one unit that specifically needs to have a very low profile curb to get into the shower. And that's a requirement, building code requirement and Minnesota accessibility requirement to make that happen. And so absolutely.
Great, thank you for clarifying that. A question around schedule, kind of both schedule in terms of the process, both going through the city and thinking about the process for approval at the city, and then also your construction schedule.
Sure. Let me respond to that. The land use application, as you're aware, has been filed. The Planning Commission will consider the matter next week. At the same time, there will be a PDR, preliminary design review process that continues, and that will be finished probably in the next 20 to 30 days. The hope is to, if all these approvals are obtained, that we would have the construction drawings prepared and start construction early fall. It will be about a 12-month construction period, maybe a little less, with tenants taking occupancy late summer, early fall of 2022.
Okay, thank you. And I will just tell everybody too that we try to keep residents and everyone as informed of the kind of the steps in these processes as possible. So we will be sharing with everybody the kind of the information as it comes up, both in terms of parts to opportunities to share your input and insights both to the city and the team, and also kind of as construction happens. So as construction projects happen, we will check in with the team here and ask how's stuff going, what are we looking at, and then we'll share that back out with the community.
Chris, on some neighborhoods on their websites allow us to put a status report or benchmarks of where we're at and notices to the neighborhood. Perhaps your association would like us to do that, and if so, we can figure out something that would be helpful to the neighborhood in terms of the information flow.
Awesome, thanks. I also just want to post, I believe Dan, this was Dan as the owner of the site, just to say, Dan posted in the chat, as the owner, I'd love to hear ideas for what type of retail tenants everyone would like to see. So feel free to post those in the chat now, or Sarah, our executive director, has shared her contact information a couple times in the chat. I'm sure she will also share it again right now. And feel free to provide any other insights, suggestions, comments on this project, including, thank you, Dan, for that question. I think that's really great, to either in the chat right now or to Sarah, and we will pass that on. I think we are getting close to the end of the questions. I do want to, there has been another question. Could you just please reiterate what are the current parking requirements for a project like this in the city of Minneapolis, and what the variance you are requesting is?
Yes, so a project like this that's not in a transit corridor needs to have one parking stall per unit. This project is in a transit corridor. That means it gets a 50% reduction per the zoning code right now. So with the 52 units, we need 26. We're required to have 26 for zoning code. And then there's 3 additional for retail, right? So that's 29 and we're providing 18 and that's the variance. However, if we would submit this project, in a month or 6 weeks later, with the assumption that City Council accepts what the Planning Commission has done with the parking regulation, this project may not be required to have any parking. So that hasn't happened yet, but it's a real possibility that's going to.
Okay, great. And in the last 8 minutes, if I apologize if I missed anybody's specific comment, please throw it back in the chat right now. I think I've gotten to most of them. There was, I'm going back through everything. There was a specific question around street trees. I see that there aren't any included in the project. And I think the person who asked was most specifically interested in the street trees, the possibility of including and almost the need to include street trees along the Nicollet side. If you could comment on that.
Now that depends up to the city arborist. Street trees fall within the city landscape plan and arborist. So if they request, if it's part of the city's plan, we'll incorporate them. By discovering these commercial streets, they tend to look at the arborist to make a decision of if they want street trees on these commercial corridors or not. So the answer is we don't know yet. And given this area that's had the solid sidewalk, we'll find out from the city how they're going to look at it, where the bus stop is and so forth. So along 36, they may require it, and we would be glad to put it in. Right now, it's all solid concrete. So this is one thing. There's one sort of tree that looks like it's turned into a bush that may be an allocation that we could potentially replace and put a real tree there. First, yeah, thank you. So that's probably where we could incorporate a street tree, because I think there's an opening one for there. But again, it's the city's call on that part.
Yeah, and I just want to reiterate that this is a public right of way here, this 5 feet between where the fence is, where the property line is and where the sidewalk is. And so this 5 feet will be grass and plantings and a little bit of green space against the north edge of the building.
There was a question about kind of like maintenance of or support of trees and plantings. What is all of your responsibility in terms of maintaining the landscape, specifically trees or other sorts of plantings that are put in as part of the project?
Go ahead, Michael.
Any trees that we ask permission to put in, or that the city requires us to put in, need to be maintained in their stated condition by the owner of the property.
And we would maintain it because honestly, it provides quality of living, quality of the housing. So it speaks for itself. We do want to maintain the landscape and encourage and enhance it because it just makes a more pleasant environment to live in. So it's a good question, but I'm going to say it's an obvious answer. Yes, that's a must to do.
Okay, awesome. I think that is all the questions that we've got through. I will just reiterate, folks. Sarah has put her email address into the chat, sarah@kingfield.org. So if you have any comments or other questions you would like to share with the team, and I also will reiterate Dan's comment. If you have any kind of insights, ideas around what retail or commercial space you'd like to see on the ground floor, that it sounds like the team is open to those ideas, and so please share those with Sarah, and we'll make sure we get to the team, get that to the development team here. I guess I will turn it back over to you guys for any last comments, and then we will sign off.
Just to say thank you for all these good questions and for taking the time out of your evening to do this. We really appreciate it, and we will try and be as responsive to your concerns as we can.
And we're excited for the project, and the fact that we could put active use on a vacant lot is just always a good thing. So thank you for taking the time to see our presentation and hear our project. So appreciate it.
Okay, thank you, everybody, and thank you all of the neighbors and community members for joining. And always feel free to reach out if you have any other questions or sites on the project. So thank you, everybody.
Bye.